This is 4.6b of algebra. So, okay, we're given a equation for a function, right? Remember, this is function notation. The f of x goes in place of our y. And we're given the domain in those brackets. And so we need to plug in those numbers to find out what the range is. So let's try our got it problem down here. So I'm given this equation, and I'm given a list of values for my domain. So I'm going to figure out what my range is. So I'll make a table, x, 4x minus 12, and then what my g of x is. So the first number in my domain is 1, so I'm going to plug in 1. 4 times 1 minus 12. 4 times 1 is 4, and 4 minus 12 is negative 8. If I plug in 3, my next number, 4 times 3 minus 12. Well, 4 times 3 is 12, minus 12 is just going to be 0. Then I'll plug in 5. 4 times 5 minus 12. 4 times 5 is 20, minus 12 is going to give me 8. And finally, I'll plug in 7. 4 times 7, 4 times 7 minus 12. 4 times 7 is 28, minus 12 is going to be 16. So this right here is my range. So I'll write that out in my brackets. Negative 8, 0, 8, 16. Here's my range. Okay, so we can identify a reasonable domain and range. We have a similar situation we're going to do, but let's read through this one. It says, you have 3 quarts of paint to paint the trim in your house. A quart of paint covers 100 square feet. And they give us the function here in function notation. And we want to know what's a reasonable domain and range. Reasonable means like what's likely, what's possible. Obviously, I can't have negative quarts of paint, right? I can't use negative 2 quarts of paint to paint my trim. So we got to keep that in mind. So what I'm going to do, well, they did it on here, but so they plugged in some numbers. It's possible that you just don't paint the trim, right? You could use 0 quart of paint. You just decide you don't want to paint your trim anymore. And then we plug in 0. The most you could use, so the smallest we could use is 0. The most we could use, you use all 3 quarts of paint. So we would plug that in. So our domain, the Q for quarts of paint, is between 0 and 3 and includes 0 and 3. So here come our inequalities again. Then, when we plug it in, the area you could cover with 0 quarts of paint is 0 square feet. And the area you could cover with 3 quarts of paint, when we plug it into our equation, is 300 square feet. So our range is between 0 and 300, including both of them. And if you check out the graph over here, this is a continuous graph, not a discrete graph. We don't just have the points, we have the lines connecting it. Because you could use half a quart of paint. You could use 2.3 quarts of paint. That would make sense. So our got it problem here says you have 7 quarts of paint. What domain and range are reasonable for this problem? And I copied over my equation here. So it's possible that I would use none of it. None of the paint, right? I could use 0 quarts. So let me make a little table here. Those are Q's. If I plug in 0, if I use 0 quarts, 0 times 100 is just 0. Right? You wouldn't cover any square feet. What's the most that I could use? The most I could use would be 7 quarts. If I use 7 quarts, that's 100 times 7, which would be 700 square feet. So my domain, my Q, The smallest I can use is I can use 0 quarts, none of it. The biggest I can use is all 7 quarts. So that's my domain. And then my range, well, if I use 0 quarts, I cover 0 square feet. So the smallest it can be is 0. And the largest it can be is if I use all 7 quarts of paint, which we found was 700 square feet. And there you go. There's your homework.